Hey everyone, Cody Hayes here, and I'd like to welcome you to the first portion of us looking at the Gospel of John, the last of the canonical Gospels for us to cover. We have here on the screen an image of John the Evangelist, and to say one thing about Christian iconography and how John is presented, he's presented as not having a beard, as he was essentially kind of the kid of the group, the kid of the inner circle. I don't hear much about this anymore, but I can remember the novels, The Da Vinci Code, where Dan Brown, that was the author, tried to, and he said, I think he wrote it was just fiction, but a lot of people took this very, very seriously. How in Leonardo da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper, that Mary Magdalene was featured in there, close next to Jesus. Well, if you understand something about Christian iconography, that was not Mary Magdalene. That was John, John the Evangelist. He's depicted often as having, very, I guess you could almost say feminine features, not as much masculine because he's looked upon as being the kid of the group. Like one thing with John, again, with Christian iconography, is that he's not presented as having a beard because of his age, because of his youth, when he was part of Jesus's inner circle. So, to kind of begin talking about, the authorship and the date for the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John, it's traditionally said to have been written by Jesus' apostle John, who's also traditionally viewed as the beloved disciple. And also, John is the traditional author of the three epistles, the three letters of the canonical New Testament and the book of Revelation. In terms of the Gospel of John, it is written essentially from a third person perspective, but the source is the beloved disciple, who traditionally is viewed as John. Um, there are some questions if the beloved disciple really was John, although that's a long standing tradition. And in terms of my dates, I factored in John being the beloved disciple. But there is a portion in the Gospel of John that I do question John being the beloved disciple, or maybe this was something inserted by a copyist. But in terms of him being the author of the three epistles and the book of Revelation, the three epistles, and this will come up too when we look at them, they begin from a first person plural perspective with the word we, and then they move to the first person singular I. So written from overall a first person perspective, but the we area comes across as though you have a community, a school. And that, in many respects, would be the case with the Gospel of John overall, that it was more than likely produced by the community that was, based around him. He would have been the person that started it, but in terms of him actually being the author, the individual writing it, and of course, it's written from a third person perspective. Um, in the book of Acts, Luke describes John and Peter as uneducated, ordinary men. So the notion of John writing this himself is very questionable. But in creating a school, in creating a community, he could have, individuals that could write for him, scribes. So, he could be the source, but he would not be the person putting pen to papyrus, I guess you could say in this case. And in terms of the book of Revelation, we'll look at that later. It is written from a first person perspective. The author is identified as John, but not specifically as an apostle. So with the book of Revelation, I always refer to that person as John of Patmos. The dates for the Gospel of John are said to be around the years of 90 to 97 CE/AD, but the extended portion of John, this would be chapter 21, It was likely written in the early second century, and I give the dates of 101 to 110 CE/AD. I tie in the extended portion of John, and we'll see this because I'll touch on it when we get near the end of this particular lecture, near the end of this gospel. But, I'm factoring in the beloved disciple being John and factoring in the traditional dates with John, as it said that John died at the end of the first century. And so I'm factoring in the extended portion of John relating to that, and I'm giving about a 10-year period for that extra chapter to have been written. So let's kind of start off here with the Gospel of John, and I have an image here of Christ the King and the question, Jesus as God. Of the canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, John's Gospel features the highest Christology. But did John see Jesus as God? Did John see Jesus in this manner? Well, if you are a non-Trinitarian, and the best group I think of here in the non-Trinitarian category would be the group that is officially known as the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, but whom we commonly refer to as Jehovah's Witnesses, they would answer that question with a definite no. But let's look at it. You have, starting off, the many I am statements in John. I didn't list the numerous I am statements that you find within the Gospel of John, but you could probably think of some of them. But just to give some examples, I am the vine, I am the bread of life, I am the light, I am the door or the gate. And where historians have looked at with these I am statements is they apply them, they make a conclusion, essentially comparing the I am statements to the statement that God gives to Moses in the Exodus account with the story of the burning bush, when the bush, of course, gets, burst into flames, and Moses hears a voice. And of course, the individual God, in this case, God, talking to Moses, it tells Moses to go tell my people, your people, the Israelites, of what I'm going to do, to liberate you from the Egyptians. And Moses is like, well, what should I, say, who's talking to me? Like, what name should I give him of who you are? And God responds back, I am who am. If they ask you, say, I am sent you. And historians make a comparison with these many I am statements to that of Moses and the story of the burning bush. But, that is an interpretation. It's not completely set in stone. I mean, you can find in the synoptics, Jesus using the words I am, and other individuals too. And people don't draw in a conclusion that this is somebody viewing himself as God, comparing himself to God. So you can make an interpretation of that, sure, but it's not set in stone. Another would be the opening here of the Gospel of John, the prologue or portions of it. In the beginning was the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word came down in the flesh and dwelled among us. Okay. With what I said so far, you can certainly make a comparison. But then when you keep looking at a number of those verses, certainly from the very beginning with, um, you know, chapter 1, verse 1 to 5, you notice that the Word and God, though, are viewed as separately. And to add to that a little bit more with history, Arius, Arius of Alexandria, who was a presbyter slash priest from Alexandria, and whose theology essentially brought forth the first ecumenical council, where the bishops of the church defined for the first time, more or less, the doctrine of the Holy Trinity. Arius, he his views were condemned, um, although they did live on till at least the 8th century, where essentially they died out on their own. But Arius, he challenged the divine status of Christ, viewing Christ as God. He challenged that. And we don't, have manuscripts, or I should say, I guess, or major documents of Arius's teachings. We have individuals who copied them because Arius's form of Christianity ultimately lost and his writings were destroyed. But we do have others that, copied him, usually to respond back to him. But Arius, when he was given some commentary on this passage, and I will mention that at this time, the Bible as we would conceive of it did not actually exist yet. Um, but Arius, in giving some commentary on this, essentially stated that Jesus was the spoken word of God. And so when he spoke with the authority of God, but he was not God. And just to add in a little extra history talking about Arius, in one of the first lectures that we had, kind of setting the scene, I mentioned how the Bible, as we would conceive of it, comes from the canon of Saint Athanasius of Alexandria, who was the bishop of Alexandria. When these issues with Arius were taking place in Alexandria, Athanasius witnessed them. Athanasius was a deacon at that time to the bishop of Alexandria, whose name happened to be Alexander. Well, I think that we'll stop here, and when we come back, we'll look more here of, did John see Jesus as God in his gospel? So take care. I will symbolically see you then.